The most profound problem facing all believers in an infinitely powerful, infinitely wise, infinitely good God is the problem of suffering, the problem of evil. And specifically when suffering, when evil descends into the lives of God's people in the pattern of suffering. Why do good people suffer? And where is God when we face the varied sorrows of life in this sin-cursed world? And with the sting of that lash, when we're going through sufferings, we cry out to God, "Why, O Lord, why? Do you still love me?" We feel disconnected from the apparently happy people around us. Their laughter, their vigor, the apparent successes of their lives can feel like so much salt in the lacerations of the sufferings that we're going through. We yearn for some explanation, for some reason why, and we're left with the worst problem of all, a sneaking doubt about God above. Does he really exist, we wonder? And if he does exist, is he really good? Is he really powerful? Is he really wise? And if so, how can we understand the world we see around us, a world of pandemics that affect tens of millions of people and kill hundreds of thousands? A world of natural disasters like tsunamis that wipe out entire coastlines of cities, towns, and villages. A world of wars and rumors of wars, of viciousness and cruelty and seemingly irrational, mindless, purposeless evil. And when we Christians try to proclaim a creator God who rules lovingly as king and who calls on all people everywhere to trust in him and love him and follow him, it is not long before we run into some serious questions from unbelievers about the existence of such a God. The problem of evil is right there with us as we share the gospel with the world. And our own faith can be deeply shaken to the roots. Now, the ancient book of Job can speak to us right where we need it the most. It can give us wisdom in the problem of suffering. All over the world, we see people suffering. We see pain and disease, injury, financial ruin, natural disasters, the death of loved ones. Eden's tree of knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Adam's partaking in it, has opened up for us an education in the problem of evil and suffering, and it's been going on for millennia. Immersed in a worldwide sea of death, mourning, crying, and pain. Now, Job, a righteous man, experienced greatly the four forms of suffering, of loss that we dread the most: the loss of possessions, the loss of loved ones, the loss of health, and the loss of reputation in the community he cared about. Suffering is inevitable, and we can and must learn from Job and from the wisdom of Job as we walk through it. The book of Job addresses the problem of righteous people suffering. Now, Job's friends have a consistent answer to the problem of suffering. Their contention is that suffering is a direct result of personal sin, a retribution from a just God for sins that you have committed. But the problem is that Job has no such sins to answer for. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. He is, therefore, the paradigm example of people, good people, who suffer great pain and suffering. He is the paradigm example of what happens to good people who go through hard times. There is no final answer to the problem of evil and suffering in this world, but the book of Job can help us put a lot of the themes together that will enable us to suffer well. Now, what do I mean by suffering well? What does it mean to suffer well? Well, I believe it means to let God bring the suffering that you're going through, to use it to bring you closer to him rather than to create a barrier between you and God. And I would zero in on one verse in the book of Job, Job 13:15, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." I think if the book of Job can bring us to that point where we are willing to trust God no matter what he chooses to bring in our lives, we will be suffering well. Even though God brings suffering in my life, I'm going to use that suffering to learn from God and draw close to God and be strengthened in my faith in God and be filled with hope in God, even when I'm suffering. Now, what is hope? Hope is a strong feeling in the heart based on the Word of God that the future is bright. It means we're looking forward to the future. Suffering well, therefore, means drawing closer to God than ever before, allowing the fires of suffering to refine your soul and strengthen your faith. Now, Job, we're going to find, didn't always suffer well. He started well, certainly, but as the trials wore on, he began to break down. And so we're going to learn more about that deep-seated sin that's inside all of us, that the pressures of suffering can bring bubbling to the surface. We're going to learn what it means to suffer poorly, and then by contrast, what it means to suffer well. So the book of Job, used rightly, helps us to put, as Job did, our hands over our mouths and not say blasphemous or harmful things about God or about the circumstances we're going through, letting the suffering work in us a weight of glory that far outweighs them all. So, welcome to this video devotional series in the book of Job, and I invite you to continue our journey into the next video devotion.